Assessment costs. Who can afford it? In the article, How Much is Learning Measurement Worth? Assessment Costs in Low-Income Countries, the authors are studying the costs of assessments for different countries. Why does it matter? What does it matter, the costs? Aren't they small enough so that it's not that big a deal? Well, you would think so, but in actuality, the costs can be overwhelming for some countries. We all agree that assessments are necessary and that to improve educational systems, we require assessments, but some of these can be costly for some countries. They're struggling just to meet the basic needs of their educational system, let alone trying to figure out how to pay for a national assessment or a regional assessment. So more research and development needs to occur so that these assessments are more cost-effective for everyone and not just the countries who have money. It's really important to evaluate the costs of these assessments, as well as what the assessments cover. There is a need for data. All government agencies, everyone agrees that we need data on our education, on our learning processes, so that we can improve them. But this information needs to be timely, it needs to be credible, and it needs to have a goal of improving educational outcomes. So much of our attention rests on the learning assessments, and that's something we've looked at quite often in this class, is where we rank, where other countries rank, where are we failing, where are we doing well. That's across the board. That's a global issue, and all countries need to be a part of that. Budget demands are a huge part of learning assessments, and that's something I myself had never really considered. I just thought, okay, we have assessments, but I never considered the cost that it would take to implement these assessments. We have a growth of our large-scale educational assessments across the board, and that raises the concern of the burdens fiscally for our LICs. So they've been doing some studies on the costs regarding these assessments, but they're limited and they haven't accounted for the discretionary funds of LICs. So low-income countries are looking at the cost versus the benefit, and if it costs too much and the benefit isn't going to give them what they need, they will opt out. They won't do those tests. They won't do those assessments, and so then they aren't a part of the PISA and the Pearls and all of that because they're too expensive to implement. So the article gives 4 different types of educational assessments. There's national assessments that evaluate all students on a national level, and most countries participate in some kind of national assessment. Then there's regional assessments, and that measures student learning across countries according to geographic region and or shared language. So it covers a bigger area. Then there's international assessments, and we've talked about these in our class, measured learning in multiple countries. So it's the Pearls and the PISA. And then lastly, there's the hybrid assessments. And this particular part of this focuses more on the needs of the LICs, the low-income countries, because they need something that is smaller, quicker, and cheaper. So they created this early grade reading assessment, which fits better with low-income countries because it addresses their needs, and it's quicker, and it doesn't cost as much. The cost-benefit analysis. The problems for low-income countries is that their budgets are so tight that they just don't have a lot of money for assessment. It does cost money to bring in people to implement these things and to score them and to rate them and all those different things that they need to do, and they just don't have the money for it. Another big issue is they don't have the qualified people to administer the assessments, to even do them, and you need the qualified people to do that. They don't have the funds to hire outside expertise, so they're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. They need to focus their funds on just basic learning and teaching at this point. And I believe we need to streamline our educational assessments so that they can participate in them without having to worry so much about their finances. There's certain overt costs and hidden costs of testing. Overt costs usually are planned for in advance. They're included in a budget. They include staffing, training, I should say a minimal amount of staffing, training, travel, supplies, equipment, rollout, management. So, those are upfront costs. This is how much it's going to cost you. But they don't consider the hidden costs, the ones that aren't planned for. When you go into a country to do an assessment, well, you have to have buildings, you have to have computers and computer maintenance, you have to have secondary staff. It starts to explode a little bit, and these are things that our LICs cannot handle. With our assessments, our low-income countries have more choices available than they have resources. So innovations such as the EGRA are good. They're need-centered. They're just enough to help them improve their educational systems, but their upfront costs are smaller and their turnaround time is smaller. What needs to be included in the other assessments that these low-income countries should be also using is we need to consider scale, timeliness, and cost efficiency. And that way, these other countries can participate in the PISA, the Pearls, and these other ones that they just can't afford right now. In the end, there will always be costs involved with assessments. I mean, that they go hand in hand. You can't do something for nothing. But the cost must be weighed against the benefits. So we need to be looking at our assessments and determining, is it going to give every country what they need to improve their educational system, and can the cost be streamlined to help them? Top educational systems are good because we know they're good because of the international assessments that we have. And it appears that globally high-performing countries that we've talked about in this class, Finland, China, and Singapore, they have the finances to administer these assessments. So they can be a part of them, and then they get ranked, and so we know they're good. But how do we know that the low-income countries who can't afford these assessments are performing? How do we know what they're doing? We don't, because they can't afford to take the tests. Their students might be doing very well. We might be very surprised. But we don't know because they opt out. They can't afford them. And I think it's important that we streamline them. We somehow make it affordable for them so that they can participate and they can get the information they need to improve their educational systems. To really know who has a good educational system, assessments need to be available to everyone, and the costs need to be equal to the benefits. So if we can rework our assessments so that LICs can participate, I think everyone will benefit.